Since the Jim Jones trial, everything has changed, but you won't believe what you're about to learn. In court, Camron revealed something shocking that could destroy Chrissy Lynn's career. Who would have thought that Camron would divulge Chrissy's shocking secret? Everyone, Jim Jones. The world is about to learn that information, which was kept hidden from everyone. But here's the twist. Chrissy tried to Jim Jones might now flip the tide in his favor by ignoring everyone. Yes, you read correctly. Chrissy's retribution, not merely Jim Jones, is at issue in this case. What follows? This drama is spreading beyond the courtroom and into the streets. You're very wrong about the repercussions this time if you believe it's simply another trial. Everyone freezes as the courtroom doors open, and all eyes are on the amid this commotion. Camron unleashed a surprise. Camron is always the one to express his thoughts and cause controversy, as you may know. But what he disclosed regarding Chrissy Lamon was unexpected and went beyond Jim Jones. This is the year's biggest test, and it has the power to alter everything. The accusations against Jim Jones have the potential to ruin his entire reputation. Allow me to introduce you to the scenario. All eyes were on Jim during this trial, and everyone was aware that his empire was surrounded by legal problems. Chathinsa, a courtroom that was intended to be all about him, and his criminal accusations suddenly became the scene of a far larger scandal and drama, and his name was dragged through the dirt along with rumors about them. It was Camron who came up with the idea of Chrissy disclosing secrets that nobody was aware of. People were already starting to question his commitment to the crew, his financial transactions, and, of course, the notorious deepfake image that Camron and the others had established from the start due to his involvement in questionable acts. But something unexpected occurred in the courtroom when Camron made the most unexpected decision and disclosed that, in one explosive moment in that courtroom, Camron exposed the sad and clandestine secret that Chrissy Lamon, the reality TV star and longtime lover of Jim Jones, had been keeping hidden for years. Chrissy Lamon had a secret, and it was more significant than any of us could have ever guessed. I understand what you're thinking, though. What could be more awful than Jim and Cam's drama? That's where the scandal really starts to get out of hand, of events that would astound everyone. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the crowd gasped. Chrissy had been playing both sides of the dispute and had been with Jim for a long time. In addition to exposing her involvement in questionable financial dealings, he also disclosed that Chrissy had been secretly working with some individuals, people Jim was not aware of, who had the ability to ruin everything, not only for Jim, but for everyone else. In the midst of Jim Jones's trial, why did Camron decide to make this public admission? Jim Jones, Camron, and the other members of the Dipset were at the forefront of the music industry for years, establishing trends and producing memorable moments. Although everyone respected their ties and devotion to one another, there were fissures underneath, and those flaws were starting to appear. Was there more going on here? Or was Camron merely attempting to draw attention to the crew's messiness? For years, Sean Camron had been silent about the emotional turmoil in their relationship, which had always been complex. But he saw a chance to expose Chrissy's role in something far more sinister that could have played a part in Jim's death during his trial. Camron's disclosure of this truth extended beyond Chrissy's private life. How Chrissy felt about all of this must be a mystery. Was she taken by surprise? Was she always aware of this plan? Or is there more to this tale than anyone wants to acknowledge? Before we get ahead of ourselves, though, let's examine the criminal networks and the individuals who are operating behind the scenes. Everything might be destroyed by this disclosure, including the public's opinion of Jim Jones as a musician and the devoted following he formerly enjoyed. In addition, we need to think about the significance of Camron's bombshell. We need to ask ourselves, what was Chrissy's involvement really about? How deep did this conspiracy go? And who else was involved in these shady dealings? This isn't just about a trial anymore, folks. About betrayal, secrets, and loyalties that are being tested in the most public way possible. What does this entail for Jim and Chrissy's relationship? This is where things get even more confusing. Is this trial going to lead to an irreversible split that impacts both their private and public lives? Was Chrissy the one who dragged Jim into a scandal? Or was she only a victim of the situation? We haven't even heard the answers to all of these inquiries yet. We haven't even touched the surface yet. But bear with us as we dig deeper into the consequences of Camron's confession in court. I can assure you that things will get even more combustible. After Camron's bombshell disclosure, the world watched in disbelief as the courtroom erupted in pandemonium, and Chrissy Lampkin, who had been Jim Jones's rock for years, now found herself at the center of a storm. Never expected, but the revelation of deeper linkages, covert collaborations, and covert ambitions was just as important as the shock value of Camron's comments. This is where things become extremely messy, so let's break it down. After being portrayed as the loyal companion who had stood with her guy through thick and thin, Chrissy was now the target of grave charges. But Camron wasn't merely stating illogical things. Chrissy was apparently engaged with dangerous individuals and real relationships, the kind of people who could destroy careers with a single phone call. The charge was simple. Chrissy had been secretly collaborating with individuals from Jim Jones's past who had agendas and were not above exploiting situations. These weren't merely friends. They were athletes who Chrissy had somehow become involved with the world of crime, corruption, and dishonesty, where they worked in the background, pulling strings. The fact that Jim was ignorant of Chrissy's actions, her connections to these questionable individuals, and the secrets she had been hiding from him was even more startling. According to Camron, a man who had been love and loyalty had blinded them, but suddenly the truth was out. Everyone except Jim had known about Chrissy's secret existence. But hold on, let's take a step back. After years of supporting Jim, why? Would Chrissy suddenly start seeing individuals who could destroy him? The intensity of the inquiries was increasing. Was this all a lie, or was there a more sinister agenda at play? Now, let's talk about how the public has responded too. All of this is because when something like this happens, the media, fans, and even the people closest to these celebrities start to doubt them. Everything was suddenly up for grabs for the supporters who had previously backed Jim and Chrissy, who had followed their every move on reality TV, and who thought they were the ideal marriage. When the fans found out that Chrissy was supposedly involved in this, what do you think they were saying? Jim had always been their guy, the devoted and light-hearted rapper. But suddenly he was being drawn into something much bigger than he could have ever dreamed. Numerous admirers were accusing Chrissy of taking advantage of Jim, according to people familiar with the situation. Some even went so far as to say that she had been exploiting Jim's reputation and notoriety to advance in society while when fans discovered that she was covertly working against him in the background. They were astonished and disillusioned because they had once liked the duo. They questioned whether this was the mark of genuine loyalty. Not to mention the media, which was everywhere and was rewriting the story in every possible way. While some media outlets accused Chrissy of being a gold digger, others said she was a puppet master attempting to control Jim. The scenes to achieve her own goals. But the issue was that no one knew what to make of them, because the plot was changing hour by hour and appeared to get more intricate with every new element. But this is where things start to get complicated because Camron didn't simply accuse Chrissy. No. He went much further and started revealing some very unsettling information about Jim Jones. And according to Camron, Jim had been making bad decisions for years, getting involved in questionable transactions, and hanging around with people who were using him as a pawn. People who didn't care about Jim, but were interested in using him to further their agenda. Camron claimed that Jim was not only unaware of Chrissy's business dealings, but also blind to problems. Some well-known people you wouldn't expect to hear mentioned alongside Jim Jones. These were the kinds of names that not only denoted negative business, but also illicit businesses that were unrelated to the general public and operated behind closed doors. Camron claims that Jim had. Around him, Jim had encountered people who had been deceiving him and leading him in a direction that path that, as it turned out, was just at his home and was guaranteed to cause difficulties. Even more startling is the fact that Camron described Jim's involvement in these actions in detail, rather than merely mentioning them in passing. Despite his years of involvement in these activities, he never noticed it, perhaps because of ignorance, denial, or a complete lack of concern for the give it some time to sink in. Jim was now facing the consequences of choices that had to do with the same individuals Chrissy had been secretly working with. Being involved in something you were unaware of is one thing, but realizing that the individuals you trusted the most and were closest to were the ones who brought you into this mess, which is precisely what Camron was implying he was, is quite another. The worst part was that the stakes were bigger than anyone could have imagined. And Jim was the one who had been blinded by love and enmeshed in a game he didn't even realize he was playing. As the courtroom drama developed, it became clear that the collapse of an entire enterprise was at stake, not simply one person's mistake. There was more at stake than Jim's job. It became clear as the courtroom drama progressed that this case was about much more than a personal scandal. It was about the entire empire they had created being shattered, the fan base in chaos, the industry looking on, and the legal repercussions. It wasn't only about Jim Jones's public image being ruined, or Chrissy Lumpkin being exposed for her illegal acts. We're just starting to come to light. And the fact is that everyone is avoiding this story because it was a career-ticking time bomb rather than just a personal mess. If you thought that would pass, think again. The world was witnessing the collapse of an entire brand when Camron came clean, not just the public exposure of a couple's personal issues. Jim Jones was a leader in the hip-hop scene and a cultural figure in addition to being a rapper. Hop world, and now he found himself in the middle of a potentially life-altering legal nightmare. Lawyers were on high alert as soon as Cameron's remarks made it to the media, because they were saying that Jim's previous relationships, the questionable individuals he had allegedly hung out with, the money trails, the potential for criminal liability, and who could forget the government were all starting to surface. Jim's prior ties had already drawn the attention of law enforcement, especially after Camron's startling revelations. Federal officials were looking into racketeering, money laundering, and potentially even more serious criminal activity, according to people close to the investigation. For Jim and Chrissy, what did it mean? The most obvious result was that Jim and Chrissy might have to deal with legal issues. Jim could be brought down by his relationships with the wrong people and his unwillingness to act on the warning signs, regardless of whether he was personally participating in criminal operations. However, there was something even more important at play here: public outrage. If things didn't work out, the business has already started to shift against years in prison. The streets were raging with rumors, labels were creating barricades, and the impact from this trial was only beginning. Let's discuss this scandal's aftermath. The networks, businesses, and brands that had been there for Jim and Chrissy for years suddenly had to face the uncomfortable question: should we still stand by them when their entire reputations are on the line for someone like Jim Jones, who was formerly invincible in the hip-hop world? When calls from sponsors and partners started to flow in, the truth set in, and many people started to cut ties with their associations because they were afraid that the public's opinion would change. Indeed, there were reports that Jim was losing a number of contracts. Chrissy's case wasn't any better. She had already been painted as the ultimate villain by the media, and her claimed hidden life was now overshadowing all of her years of dedication and support for Jim. The public wasn't buying it, and industry insiders were starting to question her allegiance and sincere intentions, so it wasn't only fans who were turning against her. The pressure was being felt by some of the biggest names in the industry. She was now viewed by many who had formerly commended her for her fortitude as a chilly, crafty individual who had been playing a game for years. And let's not even talk about Camron. The turmoil in the hip-hop culture escalated as soon as he opened his mouth. Her admirers accused her of using their relationship as a springboard for her career and of manipulating Jim. Camron, who has a reputation for being frank and uncompromising, was not giving up. Rather, he was demolishing everything Jim had worked so hard to achieve. It was unclear if Camron was genuinely trying to exact revenge, or if he was just trying to hide something from Jim that he couldn't see since he was blind. Consider for a second the possible legal consequences that could have arisen if Chrissy had been associated with the wrong. Jim's case was more complex. Due to his ties to known criminals, he might be charged indirectly. The law doesn't always give a damn about stuff like this. But we're talking about being caught up in a web of unlawful activity that he might not have even been aware of. She might be charged with major felonies that might prevent her from being released from prison for years, such as conspiracy, fraud, and even racketeering. Jim was clearly no longer the invincible man he had been, and his formerly devoted followers were starting to doubt everything. Once a hero to many, the rapper now had to face the fallout from secrets, manipulation, and treachery. But can they bounce back from this? That's the real question. Do Jim and Chrissy have a chance to save their relationship? After everything that has come to light, will they rebuild their lives, jobs, and relationships? Or is this the end of an era? However, one thing is for sure. Jim Jones's name will always be linked to this trial, this scandal, and the subsequent discoveries, which will go down in history as one of the most startling tales in hip-hop. As a result, the story is far from over. The legal disputes, the courtroom spectacle, and it remains to be seen if Jim Jones and Chrissy Lampin will ever get over this. The fans are left to pick up the pieces, but we are just left with the fallout. The truth has come to light, and there is no going back. What will happen to them is the question at hand. Will their current career come to an end? Will there be harsher legal consequences than scandal itself? And more significantly, what is the true extent of this fallout? You don't want to miss what happens next, because it is still a developing narrative. So please share your ideas in the comments section below. Is there more to Camron's determination to destroy Jim's career than first meets the eye? Or was it a premeditated move? Remember to like this video and tell your friends about it if these findings have stunned you. We have much more to unveil, and this is only the beginning. We appreciate your time, and to keep up with all the latest breaking news, please subscribe so can find more shocking tales like this one. To make sure you never miss a breathtaking moment, turn on alerts. The next time, be on the watch, because in the world of celebrity drama,